This is 11th grade lit, and we're getting some notes on the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. The AP people, they don't recognize this book as an adult book. I think they kind of categorize it as a youth book. I disagree, but it's fun to read. The ideas are not, in fact, they're very not youth-like, but I just wanted you to know that it's not going to be hard for us to read. We're going to read it together just to stay literally on the same page. But it's not going to be hard for us to read it. And do you mind, I think do you mind getting that for me, Jack? There's more to Jackson than his height, and there's less to Ben than his height.
Or should I hold it?
Yeah, probably.
I wish I was this tall.
I know, me too. I wish you were that tall too.
Yeah, but you're useless. Oh, it's a joke. No, I really not. It's not really. He's not yet. He's broke now.
Hey, it's not his fault, it's tall.
Could be any more true. Ben, bro.
All right, I don't remember exactly when we left off. This might have been it. I can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. Never mind.
Do you have this?
I have it.
Okay, well, it could have been the one beforehand, but let me just look back one.
We stopped.
What this one was it?
No, we did that one.
And you did this one?
No, not yet.
All right. All right, so who is this guy, Stevenson? That's what he is. He was a writer. He also was a world traveler, wrote books about it. He adopted an unconventional moral values. In other words, he fell in love with a married woman, and then he married her later. Hey, thank you for bringing that up. Sure. So for the Victorian period, he was considered very unconventional. He was a Calvinist. The Scot kind of adopted, I guess, I don't know the whole story of that, no Presbyterianism. Right now, I'm a practicing Presbyterian. But I think they come out of the Scottish his heritage. But one of the things that he wrote about, or actually did not like, and that is hypocrisy. The whole Victorian period was marked by hypocrisy. You know what that means. You say one thing, you do another. The word hypocrite comes from the Greek word. It is a Greek word that's for actor. If you think about it, what are actors? They are people they're not the person you see on the screen. They are pretending to be somebody. That's their job. But when people do it in real life, we call them hypocrites. Again, we call them actors. So you need to get this down. So, all right, can we move on?
Yes.
All right. So here's his background. He's born in Edinburgh. That's how they say it. We might say Edinburgh, but they say Edinburgh, Scotland. His father was a civil engineer, particularly known for designing lighthouses. So as a kid, he would accompany his dad on these trips to visit fishermen and lighthouse keepers. He actually developed tuberculosis, probably made it worse from those trips with his father. So something that seemed pretty benign, in fact, pretty positive. Spending time with your dad, who does a pretty interesting job, designs lighthouses, turns out to be a lifelong illness. It's the reason why he traveled so much, because he traveled a lot in the South Seas, the Pacific, specifically the South Pacific. Anyway, that was because of his tuberculosis. I think we conquered that. I don't think people get TB anymore. It's very rare. But it was very common during this period in the early part of the 20th century. You would literally, not to be gross about it, but you would literally cough up blood. Of course, you're getting it out of your lungs, and that was a bad sign. One of his famous books was A Child's Garden of Verses. He wrote that for children. It's in the title. and it was an something that he wrote it to his childhood nurse, who encouraged him to read, and he read to him. I always like to know why authors became authors. I've spent 45 years teaching authors and teaching books, and I was encouraged by how they became writers. I think every English teacher is a writer at heart. Some of us don't follow through on it, but maybe others do. But he was encouraged by that. I think you can get copies for children. I mean, these little golden books you probably remember as a child. There's actually some of those with illustrations. You can find A Child's Garden of Earth. Now, his was not written like that, but it was written for children. Can I go on? All right. He went to the university, or Edinburgh University, to study engineering and laws. He's pretty smart guy, but he started to rebel against the values of his parents. We were having a conversation at lunch today. I was kind of just listening. But we were talking about some students in the past. I didn't get any names. I wouldn't share them if I did. But that at some point it became. We heard that they rejected their Christian faith. Obviously, that's going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen to you, but in a school of, we put out, 45, 50 graduates a year, done it for 25 years. So clearly there are going to be people that fall from the faith, or were never in the faith. I personally believe you can't fall from it permanently. If you're a believer, you can't lose your faith. If you clearly you have lost your faith, then I believe that was you were never a believer. Doesn't mean you couldn't become one. That's the thing about it. But anyway, he did that. He kind of rejected his parents' faith. He passes the bar exam, which means he could be a lawyer. He was obviously very smart, but he decided to travel and write instead. Part of the traveling again was because of his TB. He meets and falls in love with an American woman who's married, who's also 10 years older than he is. That's part of the unconventional part, yeah.
I've heard of the last name Osborne from somewhere else.
But there are a lot of Osborne.
Ozzy Osbourne,
Yeah.
you idiot.
Our soccer coach at Page High School was an Osborne.
Come here, dude.
Yeah,
Was she a sugar mama?
I think you're asking the wrong person about that.
Like, did she have like more money than him?
I don't know.
Probably was.
All right, I guess his first book, it's one of the first books he published, was a travel book, an inland voyage, and travels with a donkey and the thing. So he became a world traveler. It was popular in this period to write, for people to write travel books and for people to read them.
Thank you.
That seems strange to us. We watch shows on TV about it, but we don't tend to read books about travel. You know, we watch it maybe, we don't read it. My grandfather had about a volume of 20 books. They were all travel books. And I don't know what kind of reader he was, but he would stand, and when he got old and retired, he'd stand and look at the books. He would just stand there in front of the bookcase. But I thought that seemed kind of boring to write a book about traveling. I'd rather travel than to read a book about it. But it was a popular genre. Even Mark Twain wrote a book. It's a satire of traveling, so it's still about traveling. And this is something I can give you credit for, so make sure you do take the notes. I can give you like homework, classwork credit. I'm going to move on. All right, so he finally marries her. She did divorce. That's still illegal to marry someone who's married already. Supreme Court decided that in the 1800s. But anyway, it was still kind of unconventional. Are you taking that?
I was just looking at it.
Yes.
What's the punishment for, like marrying someone and you're already married to someone?
That's a good point, you know, that was brought, I read court cases when I was in college. I took a fascinating course about religion in the Constitution, and we read court cases about that very thing. Maybe he picked that out probably because it was, you know, kind of interesting. The Supreme Court, Mormons were at that time. I don't think the Mormon Church supports that anymore. It's illegal, but that could be challenged in the future because unfortunately the definition of marriage in our country has been changed legally, you know, and so who knows, you know, someday that might become legal again, but it didn't pass muster in the 1800s. Treasure Island is probably his most famous book, and I love the idea that he wrote the book from a, he and his stepson made a map, and he ended up writing a book based on that map. He did more traveling. Henry James is a famous British writer, and the book we're going to read, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and Kidnapped, which is another book I've never read, 1886. So this is the time period he lived in, what we call the Victorian period. Until the current queen came around, she has been a queen for 69, going on 70 years. And until she came around, Victoria was the longest reigning monarch. So the two longest reigning monarchs in British history were women. Elizabeth, she's number one, and Victoria was number two.
Are you a fan of the Queen?
I kind of like her. I mean, we've read stuff and watched movies about her, and I don't like that whole business. I'm not a fan of the royalty, but as far as a person, I think she's pretty good. All right, we'll finish up with these next two, so I hope you're taking these notes. He, in 1888, that was the year my grandfather was born. He sails the South Sea with his wife, stepson, and mother. He eventually settles in Samoa. There's an American Samoa and there's a British Samoa. I suppose it's British Samoa. And he actually dies there, and he has I think he's buried there.
Attention DR students, student drivers, and student athletes may now leave the
All right, we'll see you Wednesday.
When he died from?
Tuberculosis.
He's gonna say no.
Yeah.
He's actually believing you. He's gonna say no.
Y'all play today?
Hey!
Mr. Cole.
Yeah, see ya.
We gotta know who next well.
Oh, hey, guys. I missed to take info yet. Tell them tomorrow's gonna be a study hall during.
Oh yeah, Mr. Shelley sent an email for that.
Okay, so y'all know about that.
Oh, what was that gonna do?
You can't go to art or anyplace else.
You can't go anywhere else unless you have it from the teacher ahead of time.
You can't just.
From the teacher that you want to go to, and you have to have it ahead of time.
Right, thank you.
So that one covers myself and Sadly.
Alistair?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think that covers
Yeah,
myself and
this is
Sadly.
good.
Okay, sweet.
Are you gonna, you need to at least show up and see me.
Okay.